All right, welcome into Prime Suspects alongside Adam Bjorn and Prime Sports co-founder Joe Brennan Jr. I'm your host, Matt Landis. Today's topics: the Masters and the NBA playoffs from Prime's perspective, the prop swap saga that took gambling Twitter by storm, and the upcoming showdown between Kalshi and states across the country. Kicking it off with the latest from Inside Prime Sports, the 89th Masters was one for the books, with Rory McElroy completing the career Grand Slam in dramatic fashion. We'll get Adam's point of view from both sides of the counter. But first, Joe, from a fan perspective, it's difficult to imagine a much more compelling experience. What were your top takeaways from this past weekend's Masters?
As far as square action, square action's driven a lot of times by a really compelling narrative. Rory is obviously a really compelling narrative, especially in Augusta, Georgia. The playoff making it even more so. So, yeah, I mean, no surprise. And the other thing is golf. Look, they like a good comeback story. Golf is looking for a central figure. For some reason, Scotty really hasn't captured the imagination as a personality, the way a la, Tiger or Arnold Palmer or Jack Nicklaus or the like. So, Rory, it's hard to believe, you talk about Rory, it seems like he's been around forever, since he was 15 years old. He's in his 30s now. So for him to finally pull down the green jacket, obviously is great. It certainly drove viewership, which is going to drive the betting action, particularly on the square side. So, at least from as far as a handle perspective, things couldn't have, I think, gone particularly better unless somehow Tiger came out of the gallery and started playing with him. Now, I'm very interested to hear from our man Adam how it translated behind the counter.
And Adam, let's get to that, because last week you suggested Prime's rooting interest was for a live golfer to win, and we got a playoff with two non-live golfers. I also recall hearing you say that it was the best betting weekend of the year, a phrase we might hear again in just a few weeks leading up to the Kentucky Derby. But for now, how was the tournament for you as both a bookmaker and a bettor?
So again, more as a spectator, that's probably one of the best Sundays of golf that I've ever experienced in my, how many ever years being a golfer growing up and watching it. And as a bookie and a punter trading it and betting it, I mean, that was just a wild ride that no one could have predicted at the beginning of the day. I mean, it started on the first hole with the two-shot swing, and then a couple of holes later with another two-shot swing, and then Rory was locked in and home. He laid up perfectly, and all he had to do was just play one more shot under the green, and it was all over, and he put it in the water. I mean, we experienced Rory's escapades in the US Open last year when, again, he seemed like he had it locked in and blew up and lost it, and thought he was going to do it again here, and was hoping he was finally going to do it again here, because we needed Rose. Rose was someone that's generally not bet very much. Had him on side all through the last round. Early on, the action was on DeChambeau and Rory. So, on anyone trading live on the Sunday had to have had a great position on Rose, from where he was coming off, and no one expecting I don't know, what is he, 44 or something around that, to come back like that on Sunday after the round he had on Saturday. But volume was great for the entire week. As I said, it's one of the best events to trade and be involved in all year long. But to get that speculative show on a Sunday was just, it's what every gambler, golfer, fan, whatever else wants to experience on a major Sunday, let alone a Masters Sunday.
And circling back to Joe's point, unless I missed it somewhere in translation there, can we get a bit more clear on how the excellent volume and the excellent viewing experience translated to the profitability, or perhaps lack thereof, on the bookmaking side?
We lost. Rory won. We needed Rose. But yeah, I mean, it's just, there was opportunities. The volume came in. Definitely Rose winning was a hell of a lot. It was a decent swing across Ohio, New Jersey, Arizona, our, Bet Chris in LATAM and whatnot for us as Planetech. Yeah, that the second shot into 18 on that playoff hole was a significant detrimental bottom line shot for us.
Understood. And if we want to shift gears for a moment from the green jacket to the pursuit of the Larry O'Brien Trophy, the NBA playoffs begin tonight with a couple game ones in the play-in tournament. So Adam, what's the book rooting for between now and this season's champion being crowned?
Again, it's we need an outsider. We need a Justin Rose to try and turn this thing on its head. But I was just looking sort of for tonight's games. The volume hasn't been real heavy. Like the series betting there hasn't been a lot on it. Tonight's games, we're needing Atlanta at the moment for these playing games. It's really the whole aspect of futures and series betting, and that just isn't what it was, 10, 15 years ago. Most of the players are looking game to game and sort of more getting involved in that. So you don't have massive exposures on the outrights or anything like that. And on the other aspect of that, you don't want those things like in an Ohio where when the bet's placed, you're paying your tax on it then. So bets back in November, December and whatnot, you're paying your 20% taxes on the bet when it comes through the front door. So there's no need or hurry to sort of build up any kind of big positions in those states where that happens. So generally it's just the game to games right now. And, tonight we're going to need Atlanta, the second game, the Grizzlies, and that's sort of where we'll go. It's just day to day right now.
And on that note, guys, let's make a pretty hard pivot from the NBA playoffs and Masters weekend to what some would call amateur hour, our water cooler segment this week. Going to go deep on the recent pandemonium at PropSwap. In a nutshell, as detailed by Zach Thomas Aku of Next.io, PropSwap is a secondary betting marketplace that came under fire last week in the aftermath of a Caesars Sportsbook customer selling a futures parlay bet through PropSwap that ultimately cashed. And the winning customer was expecting a payout of $37,000, but due to tax withholding rules, the net amount should have been closer to $25,700. This discrepancy sparked outrage across gambling Twitter, with strong sentiment against PropSwap for misleading its users. In the spirit of fairness, PropSwap has issued a full payment to the winning customer and overhauled its policy to help prevent a similar scenario in the future. That said, you could probably make a compelling case that a lot of damage has been done, with the core issue being that PropSwap doesn't offer buyer protection on tickets brokered through its platform, which seemingly not everybody understood prior to this case. Adam, all that considered, how sustainable does this model seem from your perspective?
Yeah, I wouldn't be touching PropSwap with a 10-foot pole. I mean,
tell us how you really think, Adam.
I mean, I understood it. It's been around for quite a few years, but to completely fuck it up like they did with custody of the ticket and the tax thing, and like this was probably one of the biggest amateur shows we've seen in the industry for a very, 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 very long time of not truly understanding how this works. And then the way they did it, reaching out for other people to try and pay this thing and dodging all responsibility and accountability. There is no way on earth, whether it's PropSwap or anything else that anybody associated with PropSwap goes out and does next, that I'd want any part of at all. This is, they say any PR is good PR. Anyone sort of taking any note, there's just no way that they want to touch this when there's any kind of money involved or professionalism or anything like that. However, in 3 months, this is probably forgotten, if not 3 weeks, and people will go back to doing things like this and we'll see it pop up again. But it was just the most embarrassing and ridiculous thing I've seen sort of pop up in any of this kind of side element business. This, I think, was more what the fuck than what the fliff non-paying is. And non-paying, it's been going on for a long time. It happens. But this one was just a comedy show.
And Joe, building on that, to Adam's point, not just about what happened, but the way in which it all transpired, PropSwap has been criticized for its handling of the situation and its communication strategy, or lack thereof. So where do you think this falls on that spectrum of any publicity is good publicity to irrevocable damage to the brand's equity?
Well, first, I'd like to thank Adam for leaving absolutely no flesh on the bone for me to chew off. I think it was pretty definitive. Your question, I think this will wind up being a case study of how not to do things in a crisis management PR course. Now, being a little more granular about it, I don't know the level to which, so PropSwap, it's essentially what they're saying is we're a marketplace, but they're like a facility. We're a meeting place for people to be able to transact with one another, and we take a fee for offering this meeting place. Since they never actually have custody of the ticket, the betting slip, it's difficult for them to be able to offer guarantees And that's a high liability for prop swap to have to sit there and say like, okay, well, the one bettor took consideration, the bettor who made the original bet, for the amount and everything like that, they took the money. So that's an enforceable contract there. The fact that they did not in any way, no party to the transaction knew about when you have a futures bet that's pays out at greater than, 300 to 1 or whatever it is, the state automatically takes the bookmaker has to take the taxes out before it pays out the winnings. Since they're not aware of that, it seemed like no party was aware of that. That's really where the catastrophe begins. I don't think anybody started with malice aforethought, but this is where the flaw in the model is. So, and the other thing is like, okay, well, prop swaps are not the only guys in this business. There are other companies that are doing this, like WagerWire is one that was kind of thrown into the PR mix. The number of players saying like, why don't you just sell yourself to WagerWire and get it over with, to the prop swap guys. This is a difficult model. If the middleman can't have custody of the item in question, then yeah, you're going to have tiers. If the money is not going to be put in escrow in any way or something like that. So I think in order for that kind of model that PropSwap and I guess by extension WagerWire and others, if they want to continue down this road, they're going to have to rethink the way they're doing it. And I think it becomes a much more complex trade, probably not immediate. For something like this, a futures wager, there's probably not going to be immediate payouts when somebody sells a ticket. They're going to have to hold the cash, the payment in trust. And then you wind up with some like eBay or Etsy type guarantee that PropSwap is going to have to do. So nobody covered themselves in glory in this one, especially in the middle, saying like, hey, why don't we have a GoFundMe campaign by PropSwap in order to pay the difference? I thought that was novel, challenging all the people who are shit talking their brand online to chip into some kind of quasi GoFundMe campaign in order to pay off the buyer of the ticket so that he was made whole on the money that he thought he was receiving. But again, this is when people start doing these ancillary business models, I think they're going to have to be a bit more thorough. They're going to have to do a better job of letting customers know these are the potential downsides when you engage in these transactions, including the taxation piece. And then maybe that way you don't have in the future unhappy parties and clearly untrained folks in PR crisis management trying to, shoot from the hip on social media to make things happen. So, I mean, not one of the better days in the US regulated sports betting market.
And with all the fallout we're talking about here, I can't help but think that just paying off that discrepancy up front of what was it in the ballpark of $11,000 to $12,000, just paying that off and making this a non-issue probably would have been the way to go in hindsight. And some could argue not even in hindsight. But if we're talking about a potentially significantly greater sum of money in the future, if the same thing were to happen with much higher stakes, just how different do you guys think that could have played out and what those ramifications would have been for this sector of the industry?
Step one is know all the rules, the laws, everything else. Like that 300 to 1 thing's been around forever. These are simple, easy pieces of information. Fine. Number two, and this should be number one, take fucking custody of the ticket. Like that is the first thing that should be done is when there's something sold or whatever else that it's transferred or is something. I mean, that's just the most common sense move as the very first thing. And that's what I thought years ago when I'd seen what they were doing. I thought that was what was happening, was they were taking custody. Same with someone, trading a sports card or anything like that. Take custody of the ticket. Like that's the first thing you do.
Yeah, it's difficult when we're talking about take custody of the ticket. Really? Like retail, printing out tickets? I mean, God knows I'd love to own Circa's, theater sports book or something like that. But this is a digital business now. So how does somebody take custody from a digital slip, particularly when they don't really seem to have the cooperation of the sports books in question? So, yeah, I think a little more has to be put into the development of this type of business if it's going to continue to operate. And certainly, I would imagine it piqued at least the passing interest of regulators when they see this. And when you see something like this, it does make you wonder, At what point do regulators step in and say, like, hey, we hear you guys have a problem here? Because, again, they're the sheriffs in town, and they don't want this kind of discord in their market.
To that point about this being in a more digital environment and the potential challenges of getting custody of the ticket, do you guys foresee a future of state in which perhaps to get a book's cooperation, a platform such as PropSwap or WagerWire would maybe make an agreement with the book to give them a small cut just to streamline the logistics of all of this? Or what else might be done to smooth over the logistics of that very important step?
Well, I mean, the digital aspect of it, cash it out. Like, why do you even need prop swap? If you're just looking to get out of a ticket or a future that you have, then that's what cash out's for. That's where the direct conversation with the book or anything like that. So prop swaps, it was only needed or invented potentially for those retail tickets that you couldn't cash out, that someone had a big future and wanted to get out at a certain point. Just like, if you're still in the circa contest and things like that, where you can, buy a piece and leverage your position. But this is all digital, and then you don't need prop swap. It doesn't exist in a digital world because all the platforms these days and on all these futures, you just cash it out and you move on.
Yeah, I see it. People are trying to be entrepreneurial. I mean, if we go back a year ago, you had that one guy who had that like 14 pick parlay that had like one leg left and it was going to pay out at some fantastical amount. I think we'd have to roll back the tape. I can't remember the exact details about it. And he had his ticket on WagerWire, I believe. But even at that guy was, knowing some of those WagerWire guys and some of the guys who were working on that guy was a goddamn pain in the ass because he would get his offer and then he would immediately escalate it. So there is a little bit of like, it's like any business. If you're going to have a marketplace and it's going to be one side might not be entirely trusted to pay off on the other side. You can't have a moving target. It's problematic. So I think the only reason I mention it is all of this, it's not just the prop swap marketplace WagerWire guys in the middle that maybe have to go back and do a little bit of fine tuning of their business. I think the participants in the marketplace also there has to be a few more tighter guardrails around those guys and their behavior in this because, what will be the ticket selling, scandal next year? By the way, that 14 pick parlay didn't pay out for that guy. He should have taken the money instead of moving the target.
Well, sticking with polarizing platforms, we will move into our look ahead segment this week. And as it faces pushback from several state gaming regulators, Kalshi has hired Sarah Slane, who helped overturn PASPA. Joe, you know a thing or two about the PASPA appeal, as well as state gaming regulators. Safe to assume there will be lots of lobbying by different stakeholders as this process unfolds. How far do you see a potential battle going, and what do you think are the most likely outcomes?
First, I think it's really generous to talk about Sarah's role as the press agent for the American Gaming Association, which jumped on the bandwagon in October of 2017 when the Supreme Court took New Jersey's suit as somebody helping to overturn PASPA. I think it does a disservice to the people. I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about like the legislators and other people who literally did do that. And to say to somebody who's jumping in at the end, to issue press releases and statements for the trade association, it does a disservice to other people's work. Anyway, beyond that, I get why they hired Sarah. Sarah's been working with the leagues since PASPA was overturned. She's done a hell of a lot of work, good work for the leagues and others and kind of like bridging the gap and helping them understand, a meeting of the minds between the casino industry, the betting industry, and then, the way their brains work over there in professional sports land. Okay. Look, Kalshi knows they're going to go to the mattresses. They're stirring a statement by their CEO, I think it was like a week or so ago. And if you really want to have a fun listen, I think that everybody should listen to Matt Peralt's reading of that statement on the Boston versus Bookies show, because it really is some high-level Americana. They know they're going to go to the mattresses on this one. The cease and desist letters coming from state AGs from a couple of states and initial litigation. That's just the opening salvo. I would be very surprised if the states don't escalate on this, simply because, state budgets are so reliant on gaming taxes. And at a time when less money is going to be coming back to the states from the federal government for a variety of reasons, states cannot cede a single dime. And in fact, they're looking for more out of this industry. So I don't think that they're going to be looking to share their toys with Kalshi, the CFTC, or anybody else. It would be interesting to see if this winds up in the federal courts, the 10th Amendment question. The states have never given the federal government the right to regulate gambling. It's something that they've clearly held for themselves. And there's no specific enabling legislation that permits the CFTC to do this specifically. Now, I don't have a dog in this hunt. I'm really interested to see how this one does turn out, because it really is an interesting move in a way of expanding the sports betting marketplace. But my guess is that Kalshi, whoever's advising Kalshi, is probably right in starting to pull in some big guns like Sarah and others in order to be able to contest this. I did think it was a little odd, considering that they hired Donald Trump Jr. to be on their advisory board, that the first market that I saw this morning listed when I went on the Kalshi was the one was, would Donald Trump be impeached for a third time? And my goodness, it was already up at 48% of the market thought he would. I was also looking at their offering for the NBA playoffs. They continue to list the liquidity available in those markets in a very quizzical way, which is each individual market seems to list the total pool rather than the individual pool of liquidity. So that's kind of odd, but I don't think this isn't going to be resolved anytime soon. And you're probably looking at a protracted battle, my guess, between the states, Kalshi, and the CFTC of a couple of years until this is probably resolved at some point back up at the Supreme Court.
And in the meantime, Adam, Kalshi released numbers yesterday that Masters fans live traded $86 million across all 50 states, amounting to 3 times the platform's Super Bowl volume. So thinking about this through the lens of states with regulated betting, how much of a threat are prediction markets, and how concerning is it for you as an operator?
So first of all, what does that 86 million mean? If you go into the numbers and you calculate it out, how I believe they're calculating it out, there was probably somewhere between $4 to $12 million actually bet by people, versus when they're saying, it's a dollar contract and someone's paying 2 cents for it when there's a 50 to 1 shot kind of thing. There's sort of an aspect of how much of that is on the market maker's side and how much is actual liquidity from humans outside of that. While this is a peer-to-peer or whatnot in some fashion, there's market makers and there's people taking the contracts on the other side of the buys and sells and things like that. So I'm not sure exactly what those numbers are real. And when comparing it to a Super Bowl, that's generally more of a close to a 50-50 thing where there's, more real money per bet than what potentially the golf odds can be. That's kind of the other struggle as well. This thing's happening. I mean, Joe mentioned that you got Trump Jr. on the Kalshi board. I believe a former Kalshi board member is now being announced for the chair of the CTFC or something like that. Like within the next period of time or whatnot, whatever powers that Uncle Donnie has or something, this will continue on and be fought for. I don't think this is going anywhere. Now, for the states, feel sorry for them for a certain extent, except for the ones that put up 51% taxes or double their taxes from 10 to 20. We've still got the excise tax that the sports betting operators have got to fight through, which I don't believe there's any kind of tax like that on the CFTC side. For me, just lay it all out. Like, go to war, compete. Come on, states, bring your taxes down where you can be competitive, get the excise tax sort of pushed back or make some kind of deals to get these things done, because this is going nowhere. And I believe that there'll be just more and more of this. I believe DraftKings and FanDuel will work out that they're better off doing this in New York than the sports betting. So hopefully this starts to bring back a more conducive sort of ability to do business in some of these states and across the board, force other states to open up because it's already in their backyard already. So for me, this is, isn't this good old America, just consumerism and market warfare and whatnot? Let's open it up. Let's do it for real. Tax it like they should tax it. So they've been saying that for 20 plus years when I first came over this side of the world. The rest of the world's done it. Just push it forward. Offer it all up. Let people be able to bet inside the boundaries of the US and whether that's in their state or federally, just bring it on.
Yeah, I mean, if there's one really immediate positive effect for the existing industry, it's that this sends a message to the states, to lawmakers at a time when you got some, like in New Jersey and Ohio, saying like, hey, let's raise the tax rate on you guys. You guys aren't paying your fair share. It's like, look, it's very easy to do a pivot. I mean, ProfitX did it in sweeps. I imagine it'd probably be easy to do it this way as well, pivoting and becoming a designated contract marketplace with the CFTC. The states, this is a great opportunity for you guys to like listen and get a sense of what the vibe in the room is right now. Because if any state is talking about like really hosing the guys who are playing by their rules by doubling up their tax burden right now, I mean, they're going to push everybody behind Kalshi and the CFTC and make cheerleaders out of them.
And Joe, before we wrap this up, going to keep the mic in your hand for a last word of sorts. Well wishes to our friend Steven Fatstiana.
Yeah, so last night on Twitter Spaces, thankfully this was not an Elf Spaces night, but so he announced under the headline, like, why I haven't been betting since February. But Steve announced that he is facing a really serious fight against cancer. He's currently going through chemotherapy treatments and is looking at, after a really serious round of chemotherapy, looking at some really tough surgery, like a 12-hour surgery for this. So he's been around, I think, as long as point spreads in this industry. So just wanted to say, look, hey, Fats, we're behind you, and we hope you do well. The guy's been a constant winner in this industry, so hopefully he continues on that streak. And one thing I do want to say is for those guys who are out there who are looking for challenges, like, hey, let's get into a fight and then let's do a boxing match. If you want to do some good, why don't you guys, instead of getting into a boxing match, why don't you compete at raising money for cancer research and pediatric cancer research as well? If you guys do that, I will open up my checkbook and contribute to the cause. But in the meantime, Fats, stay strong, buddy, and hope you get well soon.
Well said. I think I can safely assume that all of us involved in this show share that sentiment, and probably most, if not all of the listeners would share the sentiment as well. Speaking of the listeners, to our audience, from the NBA playoffs to secondary betting marketplaces to prediction markets, there is plenty of uncertainty out there. And conversely, by now, we hope you know exactly what to expect from Prime Sports as well as Prime Suspects, even if we never know quite where Joe's and Adam's takes will take us next. Thanks as always for tuning in, and we'll catch you next week. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Prime Suspects. Register for Prime Sports at primesports.com and download the Prime Sports app. You can follow us on Twitter at PrimeSuspects_, at Joe Brennan Jr., and at Adam Bjorn 2. You must be 21 or over to play on Prime Sports. Always bet responsibly and within your limits. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER.